The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Hello, this is the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name is Josh Edison. He is MRX Dentith.
It's true.
It is
I
true.
am.
And what's also true is that it's Auckland, here, in the place where we are sitting, possibly not where you're listening. I don't know. We don't
or
know,
watching.
Because while it is being filmed and recorded in your house in Auckland, I assume it's not listened to exclusively in your house in Auckland?
I don't think it's listened to it all in my house in Auckland. I don't listen to it. My mother doesn't
You
listen
don't have
to
any
it.
sort of
and
arrangement.
the cat, as far as I'm aware, doesn't listen to podcasts, although I haven't actually inspected the cat's phone recently, so I don't know what that cat is doing online. What's your cat doing online? Find out after the break.
Indeed, no. I just thought maybe you had some sort of arrangement where all the listeners of this podcast would come specifically to your house.
A listening party.
To listen to it.
Well, we'd probably get more listeners if we actually did something like that. If you want to come round to my place or Josh's place to listen to the podcast, please get in touch. The freakier the invitation, the better.
Meanwhile, I suppose you'll just have to get on with listening to it on the internet, like some sort of peasant.
I prefer the term pleb.
Pleb will do. Yes, less medieval. Now.
More ancient.
Now, yes.
Yes.
Now. Slightly different episode this week. As we've been doing the scripted newsy segment thing, and then just discussing the main issue, which seems to serve us fairly well. But this week we kept sort of putting together news articles and just kept doing it because news has just kept happening.
Yes, there has been a lot of news. I mean, there's been the big news of the last week.
There's been numerous big newses, really.
It's true. It's been a big news week.
Yeah.
We are in the thrall of big news.
And that being the case, we thought, well, why don't let's just do an episode all about the news.
Yeah, unscripted,
so ditch the script,
unvarnished, naked. We are getting naked for the news section.
As far as they know, As far as they know, but no, I'm not going to get naked.
Fair enough. I'll get unnaked for both of us.
I guess that'll have to do. So, yes, today's episode, the main body of the episode, and the news portion of the episode are one and the same.
They are identical.
So I guess we should get into it.
We should go on to the content / the news / the news, which is the content of the news of the news episode content.
That made perfect sense.
Good.
Let's do it.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
Right, well, not only do we have explosive new ejaculations from the news organ of the world.
It's true, we've been squeezing and pummeling that organ until such time it produced all the news that is fit to spit.
Or indeed appropriate to expectorate. If you want a little more.
For some reason, I'm just stuck on the
the ejaculations. No,
actually, well, you go your way, I'll go mine,
fine.
as I believe Bonnie Tyler once sang.
At any rate, my point is, not only has there been a bunch of new stuff happening, there's also been a bunch of updates to the older stuff, which we've already talked about in subsequent previous episodes. Not subsequent, the exact opposite of subsequent.
Unless, of course, you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast in reverse, at which point they are subsequent previous episodes.
Indeed, once we get the hang of beaming them backwards through time via tachyon pulses, like in Prince of Darkness, then that'll be true.
Yes.
But not yet.
We haven't even got onto the news
Almost.
yet. So.
Right, so updates. November the 4th has come and gone. I didn't hear anything about an Antifa-sparked civil war in the States.
No, I must admit, I was surprised.
No.
I was very surprised that the threat of civil war and civil unrest that certain right-wing websites were talking about last week failed to come about. You'd almost think they had made the whole thing up.
Obviously nonsense, of course, but yes, it's all a little bit strange.
If it's on Breitbart, it must be true.
Exactly.
We've worked this out over the last few years.
So, no civil war. Something that did happen, though, was in a follow-up to last week. Tainapora has been given an extra $1 million, I believe, in compensation. After our brand new Minister for Justice, Andrew Little, dived onto the case like a soldier on a grenade, but that's possibly the wrong connotations there. Dived on it anyway, with gusto, and sorted the whole thing out straight away. So, again, that's a nice thing. Now, a slightly meatier update, the JFK documents. So we talked about these last week. At the time, people had been looking over them for what, about a week?
Yeah,
I suppose.
Yeah, about that.
And there were thousands of things to get through. So since then, a few more interesting things have come up. One that piqued many people's interests was one particular document. Now, let's make sure I get this right. It was transcript of a piece of testimony from the deposition in 1975 of former CIA Director Richard Helms before the President's Commission on CIA Activities. So there's Mr. Helms was being interviewed by the counsel David Bellin, and the exchange went as followed. Mr. Bellin says, "Well now, the final area of my interrogation relates to charges that the CIA was in some way conspiratorially involved with the assassination of President Kennedy. During the time of the Warren Commission, you were Deputy Director of Plans, is that correct?"
I believe so.
Probably not his actual voice, but I'll take it. Mr. Bellin then asks, "Is there any information involved with the assassination of President Kennedy which in any way shows that Lee Harvey Oswald was in some way a CIA agent or an agent?"
And there it stops.
And a lot of people have said, hang on a second there. You've got a guy being asked, was Lee Harvey Oswald an agent of the CIA or something? And then they haven't included his reply.
Dun, dun,
what
dun.
What the hell is going on there? Unfortunately, it turned out the reason why his reply wasn't included in the latest release of JFK documents is because it was released in an earlier release of JFK documents all the way back in
1994.
1994, yeah. So basically, Mr. Helms went on to basically say no.
Yeah, this question's basically been asked before. We've already reported on this. There's no evidence that we know of in the CIA that Lee Harvey Oswald was an agent or was working with any agents in the CIA. This is old news. In fact, as Donald Trump would say, it's fake news.
So everybody got their hopes up very briefly, I think, but then were brought hurtling back to reality.
Kind of shows that even in the era of being able to search through official archives and these kind of requests, it's very easy to find a snippet of information, not see an immediate link to something which also covers the same topic, and assume there's something mysterious. Was it actually required people who were very well acquainted with previous CIA documents about JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald to go, no, this is not new. We've actually already seen this transcript before, and lo and behold, here's the response.
So apart from that, the only other things I've seen coming up was more of this sort of the more sordid side of things, documents relating to Martin Luther King Jr.'s sex orgies somewhere. I can't remember. It was all just a little bit salacious. And then, now what's this about Hitler?
Well, yes,
Hitler?
One of the things we found out about the JFK files was the CIA informed JFK, presumably before his death rather than afterwards,
You'd hope so.
that someone claiming to be Adolf Hitler was alive and well in Colombia. Now, the CIA said the odds of this being true were pretty low. They were fairly sure the person who claimed to be Hitler was simply a German Nazi who looked like Hitler and was pretending to be Hitler in one of the Argentinian enclaves the Nazis were living in after World War II. And they went, we're fairly sure it's not Hitler. And the amount of money we would have to spend to investigate this on surveillance, sending agents and things in, would be so preposterously high that we think that on the balance of probabilities it isn't Hitler and it isn't worth investigating.
Which again is a bit of a shame, I suppose.
And it's a shame that they didn't investigate whether Hitler was alive, or a shame that Hitler is dead and not living in Argentina here, Joshua Addison.
The first one. I
Good.
think. Yes,
Good.
No, definitely the first one. Right, so that's the updates now, the updated news. Now it's the new news, or news, if you prefer.
You've just said the same word twice, but with slightly different emphasis.
Yes, I did.
Good. Anyway, in actual news, as in new news, as you would like to call it, we've got a variety of different claims, some of which are quite small, some of which are quite big. So we'll start with a computer server in Georgia, which was conveniently wiped. So this story came out about a week and a half ago. So there's a lawsuit going on in the state of Georgia at the moment about the voting machines being used in Georgia, because the voting machines are quite old, these electronic vote machines, and they have a known security exploit which has been published online, so it would be fairly easy to hack into one of these machines and pervert the vote. And so some people in the state of Georgia who want to force the Electoral Commission there to update their hardware and software to more modern, more secure machines have put forward a lawsuit. And just before the lawsuit was submitted to the court, election officials in Georgia quietly wiped the server clean so that no one can actually go and look to see if the machines have ever actually been hacked.
That does seem a little too convenient.
It does seem ever so slightly conspiratorial, as if a set of state officials, afraid that having been told their machines are unsafe and having not acted upon it, to go, oh God, maybe they have been hacked and we have to wipe all the evidence, or they know they've been hacked and they're covering up. But it is very, very suspicious. No, not a good look at all.
No, but so far we're at the not a good look stage.
Yes, although I have to assume in a world where your judicial system works quite well, judges and lawyers are going to look pretty askance at the what you say. You wiped the machines. This is not in any way suspicious.
Yes. Now, are we going for the Trump?
We might
stuff?
as well. Let's get some of the Trump.
There's a fair amount of it. He said scrolling. Okay, so the delightfully salacious story about Trump getting up to dodgy water sports hijinks with Russian prostitutes.
In the bed that the Obamas had slept in Moscow.
That was possibly the low/high point of election dirt, depending on how you look at these things.
Yep, that's true. It is a quantum state of dirt.
So this has been tied back to the Clinton campaign, has it?
Yes. So the company that helped prepare the dossier was Fusion GPS. So the dossier itself was the collected intelligence collected by Christopher Steele. The dossier was prepared by Fusion GPS and presented to the world. And it turns out that Fusion GPS, at the time the dossier was collected and then revealed to the world, had been retained by the Clinton campaign team.
So what does that mean then? Does that mean the Clintons went shopping for dirt on Trump? Or was this someone who they had been financing anyway? Or what? Is this bad for the Clintons, basically?
It depends on what you think Clinton and her aides knew at the time. So the people behind Fusion GPS are going, no, it's just a coincidence. We were preparing the dossier and we happened to be working on the Clinton campaign at the same time. We do lots of work, so not all our work is for one client. The Clinton campaign team knew nothing about what was going on here, even though it was convenient to our client at the time. Other members of Fusion GPS have gone, well, yes, some people in the Clinton campaign knew, but not Hillary, definitely not her, and definitely not her close aides, just other people on the campaign team. They kind of knew what we were doing. But this dirt would have come out anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And it is one of those things where you go, your plausible deniability doesn't really seem all that plausible, given how hands-on the Clinton campaign were in every single step of Clinton's attempt to become president of the United States. The fact that you're saying that Clinton and her aides weren't aware that maybe you were preparing a dossier in the background just doesn't really ring true.
Yes, I mean, in the end, I suppose it all came to naught anyway. Clinton didn't win.
No. And I mean, there is an interesting aspect to this. No one is yet denying that the dossier is manufactured or fabricated. So there's still an open question, how accurate is the dossier? And some people say it seems very accurate. Other people say, look, the kind of sources we're dealing with are too anonymized, so it's a bit hard to find out whether we can verify any of these particular claims. But even if it does turn out that Clinton authorized the dossier herself or ordered the dossier be created, this doesn't necessarily tell us that anything in the dossier is false, in the same respect that the John Podesta emails and the DNC hack. Even if it does turn out that hack was ordered by the Trump campaign using Russia as a proxy, that doesn't necessarily tell us, in fact in this case with the DNC emails, the fact that no one seems to deny their content, this doesn't tell us that the hack was malicious in the respect that it was fabricated or manufactured information. So even if Clinton knew about the dossier, that doesn't tell us that Trump didn't do the things he's attributed to have done in Moscow, in that bed, with his pants down.
Indeed.
Urinating.
Puts a whole new spin on the phrase leak. Though if Clinton did know about and was as closely onto it as some people think she must have been, in that case it's kind of it's sort of a moral defeat, isn't it? It shows her elbow deep in the sort of dirty, dodgy dealings which they would have liked to us to believe was exclusive to the Trump side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, what one point that is important to make here, there is a salient difference between, say, the thesis that WikiLeaks released the DNC emails on the behest of Russia helping the Trump campaign versus the Fusion GPS story. Because if you believe the Trump collusion story, you have a foreign power aiding and abetting one candidate becoming president of the United States. So that's a very, very, very grand conspiracy at that point. Whilst, as far as we're aware, Christopher Steele is ex-MI5 and is now a private individual working in the global intelligence community, and thus is essentially an agent for hire, and thus there is no foreign power associated with the Trump dossier. Unless, of course, you're the kind of person who believes that people never really leave the Secret Service they've belonged to. They simply become independent agents, and there's air quotes around that for our listeners, who appear to be working for any old power, but are still working for bally old England, and thus the UK is aiding Hillary Clinton in not becoming president of the United States of Blighty. Since I've already said Hillary Trump, I might as well get the country wrong as well.
Exactly.
What ho!
Indeed. Okay, so while we're still putting the boot into Hillary Clinton, there's been talk about the primary campaign where she won over Bernie Sanders. Now, I mean, at the time, I remember there was plenty of people crying foul and the whole superdelegate system and saying everything was rigged fairly heavily in Hillary's favour. But what's come out recently? It's been the funding side of things.
So yeah, there's a book by the interim DNC chair, whose first name I've completely forgotten. Was it Deborah Brazil?
It sounds about right.
It sounds about right, and it's probably going to turn out to be completely wrong. And in her book, she has a bunch of claims. Some of these claims have been reported in the media. Some of them come from short excerpts of the book, which have appeared in places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the like, which indicate quite strongly that the Clinton campaign basically had a financial agreement with the Democratic National Committee for basically funding the DNC during the election. So it turns out that one of the consequences of the Obama presidency is that Obama raised a lot of money for his campaign, drained DNC finances to become president, and then wasn't particularly proactive about putting the money back into the DNC coffers. So when it came to this particular campaign, the DNC didn't have much money in the bank, and also turned out to have substantial debts. Clinton rode in and wrote a check going, look, don't worry, I'll cover this. But as a consequence, I basically need your implicit support. And so there appears to have been a Clinton campaign DNC agreement to basically fund Clinton and make her the primary candidate, which does indicate there was a conspiracy against Bernie Sanders throughout the whole DNC campaign, the whole Clinton primaries for the sheer fact that the DNC were never going to back that particular candidate over Hillary Clinton anyway.
Oh well.
And so it just seems like rum doings.
It does. And once again, rum doings that never actually came to anything, because she lost. Oh God, I can still see 2 more articles here with Trump in the description of them. What's next? Come on.
So the next bit of Trump news, and this is kind of here are some bad stories about an election which we are relitigating all the time because we can't believe that Donald Trump is president of the United States of America. So it turns out that Alexander Nix, who's the founder of Cambridge Analytica, who we've talked about in the past, that was the data analytics team that provided help for the Trump campaign for targeting who their message should be targeted towards to get those votes. Apparently he reached out to Julian Assange about those 30,000 Hillary Clinton emails that happened to get leaked during the campaign. So he said, Julian, I believe you might have some emails which are damaging to my client's opponent. Would you like to pass those emails along? Now, Assange claims he denied that request, and also claims that the emails weren't hacked. They were leaked by someone within the DNC. But it is interesting when we've got an investigation to possible collusion between Russia and Trump that more and more people on the Trump campaign team are at least admitting to, yeah, we did a bit of reaching out to other bodies to try and get dirt on the candidate, to the point where it's coming a little bit hard to believe that they wouldn't have reached out to Russia if Russia was going to give them some kind of advantage.
And indeed, one thing I don't think we have any plans to talk about this week is the ongoing Mueller investigation, because it is ongoing and things are just are still ramping up and people just keep getting drawn into it, and it does seem a little premature to say anything about it. But yes, the whole Trump campaign Russia leaks thing just keeps steaming along. In the meantime, you know what else is steaming? Antarctica.
It is. It's going
probably
up
not
in
actually,
steam.
but it's getting warmer. It's the thing due to climate change.
Anthropogenic climate change. The worst kind of climate change.
Exactly. But the Trump administration, presumably not Trump himself,
presumably not.
has been destroying satellites. Oh, maybe he did.
No,
I don't know.
A kind of Dr. Evil-like plot.
Yeah.
So this story is, it's not so much conspiratorial, but it kind of fits into the anthropogenic climate change denial story that we find coming out of the US in particular, but other Western nations as well. So there are a bunch of satellites over the Arctic which are monitoring the ice caps there and measuring how fast they're melting. Now, these satellites are quite old, and in many cases they're well beyond their operational lifespan, and they're slowly drifting off course, so they need to be replaced. Now, they built a replacement satellite, which the Air Force was looking after in a hangar, because they were waiting for a satellite to fail, so they could then send this new satellite up. But earlier this year, the Trump administration ordered the satellite be destroyed.
This is the replacement one,
yes,
not the old one. Yeah.
The replacement one be destroyed because it was costing too much money to store it. And lo and behold, one of the few satellites over the Arctic has now stopped working, and they need a replacement satellite. They're not going to be able to get a replacement ready until 2025, apparently. And the other satellites which are up there are bound to expire in the next 2 or 3 years, which means we're going to have a period of time where there's no active monitoring of those polar ice caps, and thus we're going to have a lack of information about what's happening to our planet during this unprecedented global warming period we have at this particular point in time. And people are pointing out that this seems to be a quite deliberate ploy by the current administration in the US to make sure that evidence of anthropogenic climate change is not available to researchers because it's politically inconvenient. As if there's some kind of conspiracy by those who want to deny anthropogenic climate change to prevent evidence of that change from getting out.
How does that fit in the sort of conspiratorial the scheme of things? If we're talking more sort of ulterior motives, I suppose. Like we have the secrecy component to conspiracies. If someone's doing quite openly doing a thing for stated reasons, but maybe has ulterior motives for doing so,
Yes, and that would be the case where you would say, look, on one level it seems quite sensible. We're spending all this money to keep something in storage. We're not using it. We could use that money to ban transgenders in the American military. And yet, on the other hand, there does seem to be a quite concerted effort by particular supporters of the Republican Party in the US to deny the science behind anthropogenic climate change. And thus, anything which would allow you to take evidence off the table would be quite convenient. So that would be the ulterior motive, which is, we don't need that satellite. I mean, we're wasting a lot of money keeping that satellite, and also if that satellite goes up, there'll be evidence for climate change, and that would be a bad thing.
Is the microphone going to pick you up whispering?
Yes.
Probably. It is quite a good microphone.
It is.
Actually, yeah. I wonder if, I suppose it puts us on slightly more shaky epistemological ground, assuming
but that's the thing,
motives,
this is part of the prior probability calculation we do when talking about conspiratorial activity. This kind of behaviour kind of factors into how we establish the likelihood of a conspiracy occurring now. We're looking at past behaviour and behaviour now and going, well, given what we know about what they've done in the past, this seems consistent with a conspiracy to deny the science here.
Yes. Right, well, let us return then to your former and future abode, Romania.
Indeed.
What's been happening there?
It's protesting. 12,000 people protesting in Bucharest on one night.
Any particular reason?
Romanians
George
love
Soros was in town?
No, Romanians love a good protest.
Okay.
So the Romanian government is putting through law and order changes at the moment, which basically are going to allow the government to control the judiciary outright. So rather than having the judiciary as a separate branch of government that can hold the government to account, the government wants to bring in changes which allows the government to control judges, the appointment of judges, and the oversight of judges, which Romanians are worried means that judges are not going to be able to hold the government to account. And so Romanians are protesting by a rather overt power grab by what they take to be a very corrupt government. Now, once again, you could say this isn't conspiratorial, because there's no secrecy going on here. The Romanian government is seizing control of the judiciary. But, once again, you get to that wonderful point, the stated reasons versus the suspected reasons. So the Romanian government's claim is that they need to enact these law and order changes, because by doing so, they're able to streamline the judicial process and make the process work better. So they're claiming their law and order changes will lead to better law and order policy and justice within Romania. But the people of Romania are concerned that given that the Romanian government is not just corrupt, but that many Romanian politicians have committed crimes, some of which are electoral crimes, and are going to be judged by the judiciary, controlling the judiciary makes it less likely that politicians will be held to account for the crimes they've committed. And so in that respect, it becomes a stated reason versus the actual reason, which indicates kind of a conspiratorial power grab to keep the dominant party in power.
Yes, certainly. Once again, another of those definitely not a good look, and we have at least some cause to think that there's something a lot more dodgy behind it.
Indeed.
When are you back to Romania?
March.
Right.
March.
When are you off to the States?
The 25th of November, so just over 2 weeks.
Right.
Well, I'll be there for 15 glorious days, half of which will be in sunny LA, the other half in wintry, cold Boise, Idaho.
Is it summery in
It'll be about 18 degrees or so.
It's not winter proper in the States yet, is it?
No, but also it's never winter proper in California.
I suppose that's true.
Actually, there are bits of California where it is winter proper. It's quite mountainous. But Venice beats. It'll be sunny.
Yes, I suppose it would have to be. Right. Well. So the last one on the list, and this probably would have been the topic of this episode, perhaps, had there not been so much other news to cover. It's just kind of got lost in the tumble. But the Paradise Papers, of course, that's been a fairly gigantic story that's come out in the last week. The result of almost a year's worth of investigations, I think it was.
Yes, it's basically the Panama Papers Part 2.
Yeah, and it's the second biggest document leak ever after the Panama Papers. We're 1.34 million files, 1.4 terabytes of data. This time it's seems to have come from a law firm called Appleby, whereas last time it was this Mossack Fonseca. I gather that while Mossack Fonseca was the sort to try and sort of stay fairly hidden in the shadows and just sort of do their dodgy dealings out of the spotlight, Appleby is a fairly sort of large, prominent law firm. Nevertheless, what's come out after journalists spent, I think, the better part of a year poring over this giant dump, has been the sorts of tax avoidance, tax evasion, which now tax evasion is actually illegal, isn't it?
Yeah, tax avoidance is legal.
But we look at it.
We frown upon it. We frown upon tax avoidance.
So yeah, people have been picking out sort of the juicy bits, talking about Trump and his associates, how they've been putting their money in offshore funds to avoid taxes. The Queen of England herself has been putting money offshore. Various big companies: Facebook, Nike, Apple, Twitter. And various film and TV stars, sort of, but basically names you, or at least some of you, will have heard of. I think the one article I read was about the cast of Mrs. Brown's Boys, which I gather is big in Britain. No one can quite understand why, because it does appear to be a terrible, terrible TV show.
Yes, with racist stereotypes, terrible examples of cross-dressing, it seems.
Yes, I'm yet to read anything that's pointed out actual illegal activities that have taken place. Everything supposedly has been above board and within the letter of the law, but it's nevertheless very, very sort of dodgy, and sort of people can point to the enormous amounts of tax revenue that countries are missing out on because of funds being hidden in this way. In some cases, like with the article I read about the cast of Mrs. Brown's Boys, who'd been found to be sort of sheltering their money, and how does it work? You set up a company in like the Cayman Islands or somewhere where they don't have a corporate tax, and then all your money you sort of get paid through that or whatever, and so you end up not paying any tax.
You find ways to make sure that you pay as little to no tax as possible by funneling your money through different jurisdictions, and then in many cases claiming rebates on the tax you would have paid in that jurisdiction because of a tax treaty with your jurisdiction, etc., etc.
So in a lot of these cases, when it's big companies doing it, I suppose, and people who with actual ties to the financial world, you can possibly believe that they actually really knew what was going on and knew exactly what they were doing. When it comes to the more sort of lay people like your entertainers,
are you trying to excuse the cast of Mrs. Brown's Boys? Are you trying to say that the cast of Mrs. Brown's Boys are not guilty of some kind of immoral activity?
They're guilty of some sort of crime against humanity, but possibly not financial misdealings. But basically what I'm just saying is that in these cases, these are people who have a bunch of money, they have accountants, the accountant comes to them and says, hey, you can keep more of your money if I set things up this way, and they say, okay, and don't really think about it until it's brought to their attention. So, I mean, this is what happened to Jimmy Carr a year or two ago. Jimmy Carr, the British comedian, and the papers, it was brought to the attention of the country at large that, hey, look, Jimmy Carr, who's a great big lefty, is avoiding all this tax. And Jimmy Carr basically said, oh shit, so I am. My accountant said you can have more money if you do this, and I said okay, but now that charitably, now that I'm aware of what's really going on, uncharitably, now that I've been caught out. So he's stopped doing that, so these other actors that I've read about have basically mounted a similar defence. We didn't know exactly how dodgy it was. We just knew our accountant was off doing stuff with our money and didn't really question it, which we probably should have.
Now, to get on a political soapbox for a moment here, because as you know, I never get on political soapboxes. You're not known for it on this podcast or vodcast. The argument that some people have that you have a duty to pay as little tax as possible, or the excuse some people have, which is, well, my accountant said I can pay less tax if I do these things. I don't understand that motivation. Call me a socialist.
You are the dirtiest of filthy socialists I know.
But taxation is what keeps our civilization running. It gives us things like hospitals, education, and the like. And I kind of feel you have a duty to pay your taxes, whether they be big or small. And the idea that, you should go out of your way to minimise the amount of tax you pay towards your civilization just seems immoral to me. Now, I know some people say that taxation is immoral, but they're just wrong.
They're generally libertarians, though.
Yes. Yeah, I find this notion that tax avoidance is something which we should tolerate in society. Yes, no. Just pay your taxes. It's really as simple as that. Pay your taxes.
Yes, it's. I guess what grinds my gears and the gears of many people is the sort of hypocrisy of the sorts of people who will cry foul and think it's the worst crime ever if sort of beneficiaries or sort of refugees or whoever might be being given money by the government possibly maybe get a tiny cent more than they're entitled to, and yet at the same time are costing the government much, much, much more money in lost tax revenue.
Yep.
But yes, this is more political soapboxing. But actually, now that I think of it, my father, who for a long time ran his own business and had an accountant for it, and the accountant would say, okay, we'll put this here, we'll put that under this and that and so on, and so you'll end up not paying any GST. And my dad was always like, and this is legal, and you go and say, yeah, and you go, oh, okay, I guess. But yeah, it did seem a little bit odd. And especially jumping back onto the political soapbox.
Sorry, did you ever get off the soapbox?
Well, I don't know. That was possibly a digression in the middle, I'm not sure. But we're very much firmly establishing my position as being soapbox adjacent. Or at least, what's a fancy word meaning on top of? I'm not sure. On top of. No, it's the fact that people who can afford lawyers and trusts and all this sort of stuff don't need to break the law because they have the resources to get around it. Where this was the whole materia ture benefit fraud thing. But anyway, we're living in the past, Matthew. Stop living in the past.
I'm now in the future.
Good.
And you know what the future is?
So bright you have to wear shades?
No, it's the end of the episode.
Ah, yes, you're right, actually it is. Because I think we've run out of time around the same time we ran out of material, so I guess it all worked out quite well.
Yeah. In short, tax good, and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump possibly bad people for different reasons.
Yeah.
And the moral of the story is never tickle an elephant when the colour of the day is purple.
True. Not entirely related to anything we've said. But
No.
I think it still stands. So
Yeah.
I agree. So that's the end of the special newstacular Newsapalooza? Musical? No.
Oh.
No, that was a step too far, Matthew. I'm sorry.
You just don't want any singing.
I really don't. No.
You don't want me to sing the song of news.
I don't want. I appreciate that I can't stop you. I'm fully accepting of that fact. I'm just saying I don't want it. That's all. So we're at the end of an episode.
We are.
Matthew's straining not to burst into song. We'll see if he can contain himself until we reach the final end credits, as it were. So hopefully that'll be the last time we do something like this for a while. Surely there can't be that many momentous news happenings.
Kind of depends what happens with the Mueller investigation in the next few weeks.
Well, yes, although in that case we'll probably want to just do an entire episode on the Mueller investigation. But anyway,
I think I'll let you do that one. You can just sigh
Trump.
Trump. Anyway.
Yeah. Maybe that's Trump. That scamp.
What will he do
wacky
next?
with his monkey shines and horse feathers and I don't know. I don't
And
know what else, but
vampirism.
Anyway, you're back in the future again, Matthew. Come back to us here in the present.
You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy,
Yes, you
starring
have.
Josh Edison and myself, MRX Dentith. Now, Josh, how can people get in contact with you on the internet?
Well, the easiest thing would be Twitter, where I go by the name Monkey Fluids, although I suppose they could get into touch with either one of us by going to Facebook and searching for the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy and maybe leaving a comment on our Facebook page.
Or they could email us at
podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.
Now, if you want to get in contact with me, you can always find me on Twitter with the handle HORansom, that's one word, where I tweet about things in general, or Conspiracism, where I tweet about conspiracy theories, although these days it's mostly links to articles about conspiracy theories online. And of course you can find out information about our pledge drives at conspiracism.podbean.com, where you'll find a link to our Patreon and also our patron system, for those of you who want to give us a little bit of money to fund the extravaganza you are enjoying right now.
And you are enjoying it. Oh, yes, you are. Now,
You're enjoying it a bit too much. Just calm down. Calm down.
Yeah. Now, as we intimated earlier, Matthew is off travelling around the world shortly, so we'll have, 2 more episodes before you're off and away? Or
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And then hopefully I might organise some interviewing things whilst I'm there. So we actually may not have a hiatus. We may have some episodes whilst I'm away. And then, of course, the glorious comeback episode.
When you
come back,
right?
Yeah.
And then
In glory,
yeah. And then you return to Romania again, which is a comeback from their perspective, I suppose. And,
yes, and a going away from ours.
again.
But then I'll be back again in end of July. So
it'll all work out.
It's going to be very confusing.
But we'll muddle our way through.
With an inflatable doll.
Yes. So, until whatever wacky hijinks eventuate in the future, it's not the future, it's now. And now's the end of the podcast.
And so now we can only say one thing.
And it's goodbye, right?
Blurple.
Oh. And also goodbye.
Blurple. You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Edison and Matthew R.X. Dentith, and produced by Matthew R.X. Dentith. If you've enjoyed the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, why not contribute to our Patreon or Podbean patron page? And you can contact us on podcastconspiracy@gmail.com. That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.